everybody. Lance Russell and Dave Brown right along ringside. By golly, we're about ready to go with more big action.
Thank you very much, and welcome to Georgia Championship Wrestling. I'm Gordon Solie, your host, and we have quite an hour in store for us.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Championship Wrestling at ringside. This is Vince McMahon, along with wrestling's only living legend, Bruno Sammartino.
Welcome to this week's edition of Mid-South Wrestling Television. I'm your host, Boyd Pierce, another outstanding card.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Regional Rasslin Podcast, where we talk the territories. But as you guys know, I am Ray Russell, and this week, oh man, we finally get to dive back into the Los Angeles territory, going back to the LeBells one more time, early 1980s. And we're going to bring back onto the program in order to discuss such a matter, the one and only Mr. Vandal Drummond, a.k.a. Kurt Brown. Welcome back to the show, man.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for having me back, my friend.
You never disappoint. I always love talking to you, Vandal, and it's great to have you back on the program. It's been a while. I was on vacation, then you were on vacation, and we finally got together. We made this happen, and so very fortunate to have you back on the program. Always a fun time. We get great feedback, but on the top of that, I just enjoy having you along for the ride.
I enjoy it too. The feeling is thoroughly mutual, my friend.
Certainly appreciate it.
These last couple of podcasts I've really enjoyed, and I just love mentally and emotionally time traveling back and, you know, just kind of taking a peek at those halls and arenas I used to roam.
Ah, the good old days. Absolutely.
It was a fun time.
I am so sure
now, but
yeah,
I do get nostalgic for them on occasion.
I am so sure, man. I wish, I envy you and everything you got to go out and take part in and just be a spectator as well. And we're going to talk a lot more about that this week. We were kind of looking, you looked at some of the results. I was looking at some of the results, getting an idea of what was going on. You were refreshing your memory from many years gone by. But I noticed in my notes, because it's been a while since we did this, I didn't finish everything I wanted to discuss on the last episode. So at the start of this program, before we get into 1982 and some of the talent and things of that nature, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some notes I had in regards to, well, basically the shift in everything that was going on in the early 80s there in Los Angeles.
Yes.
We talked about the change in losing the English-speaking TV, which was huge, and that really changed a lot of things. But it just continued from there. It was just a huge downfall from 1980 all the way into 1982. And we were just talking off air a little bit about some of the, what they would call outlaw promotions trying to run there in the Los Angeles territory between that 2-year span. And I was questioning you on some of the names of the territories, and you remembered them to some degree. So I just wanted to pick your brain, see what I could get out of you if I mentioned a few to you here.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm not sure. I don't have a note of where I got this from. It may have been from Jeff Walton's book. It may be from another source. I apologize, guys. But I have here, it says, just after the Hollywood Wrestling Office lost their English language show, which was in the into the summer of 80, if I remember correctly. It says Gory Guerrero, Karl Lauer, and their 4 other partners created Six Amigos Incorporated. They staged their first wrestling card held at the Strand Theater in San Pedro. They also worked in Oceanside, Santa Ana, and Pomona. Do you have any memories of this territory, or this outlaw company, this indie promotion coming through?
Yes, I do. I remember Six Amigos beginning in 1981 at the Strand Theater in San Pedro that you mentioned. And it was kind of surreal to go to those shows, and you'd go to the, buy your tickets, and there was Gory Guerrero selling you a ticket, and he'd be, dressed up in a suit and everything. Very, very congenial man. I think one of the even more surreal things I witnessed was he must have had some involvement with the Strand Theater other than wrestling.
Okay.
Because I remember going to one of the shows, and there were these kids with buzz cuts and mohawks, obviously a punk band, talking to Gory Guerrero about, booking a show at the Strand Theater.
Oh, okay.
A meeting of different generations, kind, congenial Gory Guerrero, who I heard he could be a type A person at home, but was always very type B with the public, and it was just fun seeing him chatting it up with the punkers, which punkers were a lot more kind of a polarizing thing back then. Now nothing is that shocking. So.
Right, no, yeah, we've been through it all.
Yes, exactly. Well, I know that Karl Lauer originally was working with the LeBells, in early 1981.
Okay.
Because Karl Lauer used to love to boast that he was the first person who ever booked Chris Adams in the United States. And that was essentially true because he was working for the LeBells and ran San Pedro, and that was Chris Adams' first town. As time went on, I don't know what happened, but Karl and Gory Guerrero went independently, and they started running shows in Santa Ana, California. And Chavo would often headline the shows as the junior heavyweight champ. And I remember Johnny Mantell was working as the Hood. As 1982 went along, I know Santa Ana kind of phased out at some point. I can't remember. I don't think they lasted all of 92 or 82. And in 83, Karl Lauer just did Three Amigos promotion on his own with Pistol Pete Marquez doing the booking, and that was the year I made my debut. Karl Lauer booked me. Well, actually, Pete was the one who booked me, but yeah, Karl Lauer was my first promoter to wrestle for in July of 83.
Wow, very good. See what we did there? We worked it all into, it's like that 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon or something like that, or however that works. It's
exactly. I love that.
Oh, man.
6 degrees of Los Angeles wrestling, I tell you.
It goes back to Vandal Drummond every time. We'll always make it work that way, guys.
I like that.
Well, so they lose their American TV, though, and by the spring of 1981, I noticed they were dropping some towns like Bakersfield, no longer part of the LeBell territory by that point. They're keeping a stronghold, or trying to at that point, on the Olympic, on San Bernardino, and San Jose, but outside of that, not so much anymore. So things really on the decline. We've talked about that in the past, but I wanted to talk about some more of the other, like I said, independent promotions that popped up around this time period. At some point, we talked about this a little bit, I believe, in the last episode, but the Olympic Auditorium, at some point there in late 1980, changed ownership, and Eileen Eaton, her lease came up, and eventually she had to renew said lease, but the prices were going to be raised substantially, and I believe this is according to Jeff Walton's book. So take it, and I trust Jeff's, word, but at the same time, this is pretty substantial, so bear with me, Drummond, and tell me what you think about this. He says,
absolutely.
That the new owners of the Olympic, wanted to raise the price of a rental of the building from $1,500, is what they were paying at the time, to $30,000. And I don't know if that's per show there or per month, but that's a substantial increase of 20 times what they were paying in the past. And so you will notice they'll eventually start running the sports arena more often. $10,000 a month is what they were paying there, supposedly.
Now, what I remember is they began running the sports arena in 1981, and I don't remember when they returned to the Olympic, but they did return to the Olympic,
right?
And they saw the rest of their days, roll out there. And I never knew exactly what the story was, but I do know that I believe it was Bill Griffith who bought the Olympic Auditorium, and Bill Griffith would be a very recognizable name to all the roller derby historians out there.
Okay.
He and his father both, were involved in the roller derby, or in LA, it was the roller games. It is really different from the other roller derby promotions, even more pro wrestling than the other roller derby promotions. It was worked a lot more kitschy. They had a lot of stipulation matches. I think there's one where the loser had to skate in a diaper or something like that. And we had Psycho Ronnie Reigns, who was like John Tolis, would be drooling at the mouth, and kind of like a Moondog Mane, where he was this crazy-ass heel skater, and then he turns babyface and goes crazy on the bad guys. So LA was unique, both in wrestling and roller derby. I don't think they ever did that with boxing, though. So I think it would have been wonderful if they did.
Absolutely, without a doubt.
Yeah, I don't know about the raising the rent. I remember they did do kind of a, little house cleaning on the Olympic. I don't remember if that's when they took all those beautiful murals down of the wrestlers and boxers who had appeared there.
Oh, wow.
I can't remember if that was that phase or when another entity bought it in, I think, 1987.
Okay.
And anyway, was still pretty much the Olympic Auditorium, but it was getting a little, they were taking some of the flavor out of the arena.
Right, the
history. It was losing its... Exactly. And as Bob Barnett would rightly point out, we'll always think of the Olympic fondly, but you'd also remember the plugged up toilets and the tasteless hot dogs that were sold there. But we still loved the Olympic. It was a fun place. And it's interesting because 1982, as I was looking at the results, there were a couple of bright spots where there were some shows that you went to where you felt like you were staying at the Four Seasons, and then you go a few weeks later and you're saying, wait, I'm in Motel 6 now. What's going on?
Right.
Because as I was looking at results, and I was thinking about this even before I saw the results, but there were shows where they had the Villanos, the Missionaries of Death.
Oh, my.
A lot of people from Mexico. Well, of course, Mil Mascaras till the very end would still work with LeBell. They had the minis from Mexico, Gulliver, Grand Nicolai, Arturito, and Pequeño Goliath. The Chuco and Russo Flores, who were not big names, but they were local TJ boys who, as I recall, were good wrestlers, Blackman. And
yes, I saw that.
Babyface. Yeah, Babyface was there for a while. Perro Aguayo, Enrique Vera. Then Japan had Kid Kobayashi, Rusher Kimura, and Ryuma Go. And, of course, Chris Adams still frequented the area, as did his friend Ringo Rigby.
Yep.
Sandy Parker made a return to wrestling, feuding with Miss Linda. So
yeah, I hadn't realized that until I was reading the results.
Oh, I totally popped like crazy because I remember attending one of the Santa Ana shows, which was a restaurant, essentially. And I remember just seeing Sandy Parker sitting in one of the booths watching the action, and I remember just saying to Tim Flowers, "Oh, my God, is that Sandy Parker?" And he said, "Yeah, but don't say it too loud, kayfabe," because she was about to do an angle.
Oh, and, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Oh, you almost blew it for her. Way to go, Vandal. Yeah.
I already broke kayfabe and I hadn't debuted yet.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about, it's a who's who. We kind of mentioned that in the last episode, too, the demise of LA. It was like a lot of other territories and promotions where it started getting really good by the end again. They started revamping and changing things up, and the talent was starting to get back in place, but it was just a little too late with all those great lucha stars you mentioned, bringing in some of the Japanese talent. You got some ladies stuff going on. Adrian Street's there. Chris Adams, of course, up-and-comer, as everybody knows there from
and the
England.
Brazos, too.
Yeah, Los Brazos. Yeah,
how could I forget the Brazos?
Yeah, I see they had the tag titles at some point here over 81 or 82. So, yeah, they brought in a who's who from Mexico. No doubt about it. And a little bit ago, I had mentioned about another, independent promotion I wanted to get to, and people are probably wondering, why was I discussing the shift for this time period from the Olympic to the sports arena? And that's because another promotion comes in and begins running the Olympic while LeBell is running the sports arena. And so as they finish up in May of 1981 at the Olympic, the LeBells, they being the LeBells, the inaugural card for the new sports arena show, at the same time as that was about to take place, boxing promoters Harry Kabakoff and Jesus Pimentel held a Lucha Libre card at the Olympic. They had previously promoted, according to sources here, wrestling at Strongbow Stadium in Bakersfield back in 1980, with LeBell booking their talent from them. And while that venture had failed, they are now trying to work into the LA territory. So I have to ask you, listen to this. The inaugural card for this up-and-coming promotion here by Kabakoff and Pimentel takes place essentially at the same time that the LeBells are running their first show at the sports arena. And on May 29th, the Luchadors involved alone here for this rival company, Hurricane Ramirez, Blue Demon, Mano Negra, and El Psychedelico, who was one of the brothers of Mil Mascaras. So, I mean, you look at that, and they're definitely coming in, and they mean business here. They're bringing in some other top talent.
It was fascinating. There were times where Lucha Libre would be promoted, pure Lucha Libre, and they usually just hang around a bit and then leave. I don't know what the promoters aims were. That promotion did actually have TV for a short time in 1981.
Somebody bust out those VHS tapes, please.
Oh my God! You know, it's. I think I might have mentioned this before, but somebody about 15 years ago did put some stuff on YouTube that had some of those shows on it.
Okay.
And,
I know we were talking about the monster tapes and things like that.
Yes, that's right. I was excited because they had a lot of the local boys on there, and the local boys of that generation, there's almost nothing. And I was very disappointed when the guy took down the channel, but it was, I guess people were nagging him to try to sell him tapes, sell them DVDs and stuff. So
damn wrestling fans. Thanks a lot, guys. Way to be, guys. Thanks.
I don't know what their game plan was, but you got some hot cards. There's a lot of great talent. The shows would always have local talent involved. In fact, the local talent often would be in the main events, like 6-man tags. The local boys like Jalisco Primero, Falcon de Oro. A lot of our locals would be put in the main events. There was a guy named Jesse Garcia who passed away recently. He was one of the teachers for the wrestlers for Azteca and Moctezuma promotions.
Mm-hmm.
They drew well. They do really well. Okay. I mean, they didn't sell out, but even when they didn't have TV, all it took was radio spots and an ad in La Opinion, the local Latino newspaper.
And you got a flyer. Don't forget the flyer. We got a flyer.
Oh, yes. Got the flyer. And if you peruse my Facebook photo albums, I got a lot of photos there. That's where I first saw Sergio El Hermoso and Bayo Greco, the Exotico tag team.
How lucky were you,
man? I was totally lucky. So lucky. I mean, people who jump to mind, of course, Black Shadow had one of his retirement shows in LA. He did like a retirement tour. And at the time, I didn't realize just how special that was. And Jalisco Primero, one of our local boys who actually wrestled in Mexico for a while, was often in these main events. It was a great time if you're a little nerdy guy with a camera. It was really fun. Snapping pictures of Gallo Tapado, all these guys who were household names in Lucha Libre. And the fans really knew who these guys were.
That's awesome.
If you went to downtown LA, the Lucha Libre magazines were printed on a weekly basis. So I think sometimes the LeBell promotion, they didn't take into account how much the local Latino wrestling fans understood. I mentioned in one of the other podcasts how all the fans knew who the Twin Devils were from their time in Mexico. And they did the angle where they had just one Twin Devil and, oh, he has a double. We didn't know this, where all the fans who followed Mexico knew them for years.
Ay, Dios mío, two Twin Devils. Oh my, they're Twin Devils now. My goodness. Yeah. What a storyline. You have to appreciate the booking though. I mean, if the fans hadn't known, obviously that would have been a major, play in storyline purposes for that time period.
It would have been awesome.
Yeah.
They merely didn't take into account what fans knew. I remember, I might be telling you another story for the 100th time, but I remember in 88 going to an AWA taping at the Showboat in Vegas, and a couple of us chatted with Dennis Stamp afterwards for, gosh, it's been a couple of hours. But for those who don't know, Dennis Stamp was a journeyman, very talented journeyman. And in 1974 and 75 here in Los Angeles, he got a really strong push in LA. Got a lot of mic time, was even color commentator at times. And we were just talking the biz, and this was kind of like the early dirt sheet days. And about half hour into the conversation, he says, God, this is so fun. I am enjoying this. And we're kind of like, what, you're enjoying being in Vegas, or what's up? And he said, no, I always knew there were fans like this. And he says, I used to try to tell Gene LeBell and Mike LeBell that a lot of fans really understand what's going on. And he says everybody in charge insisted that they were the most simple people, and you could fool all the people all the time,
right? Which
was quite the misassumption.
Yeah, I'd say so. And that's probably part of the failure too. I think maybe not necessarily right here in the early 80s, but maybe that slow downfall was the ability or the inability to change and realize with time.
And, yes. And also a big question when we talk about 82 having some bright spots and some really, really low spots.
Yeah.
I would love to know what would have happened had Vince McMahon not approached Mike LeBell about buying the promotion.
Oh.
Because I think Mike LeBell could have just kept on running for a while. As I understand it, Jeff Walton could speak to this. I think he was getting a good payday just by airing
the TV,
airing the show on SIN, the Spanish International Network. And who knows, maybe he would have just kept on promoting in the same fashion for a couple more years. Maybe he would have gotten tired of it. Because I know the business wasn't really his passion. Making money was his passion.
Sure.
So I would. I usually don't like these hypothetical questions, but I would love to see just how it would have played out had he not a major corporation buy him out. Shouldn't say corporation at the time, but
well, it would have been interesting for certain if somebody could have with a little backing, a little power in the region. Beyond wrestling, worked with a TV station, got back on board, got some of this talent over on TV. It could have made all the difference in the world, honestly, at that time period. Because I'm looking at the cards, and
it would be.
They're not so bad,
It would be interesting because I know that Eileen Eaton, the mother of Gina LeBell and Mike LeBell, I mean, she still had a lot of pull with the State Athletic Commission. Some say a lot of pull, some say a little. I don't know, but I think she was a big part of Mike LeBell. Even in the days when he was riding high. So, she was the boxing promoter for years.
Right.
And when Channel 13, which was the, strongest LA TV there was, maybe next to Channel 5 before it, when Channel 13 wrestling got pulled, Eileen Eaton kind of tried to play hardball with Channel 13. Because she aired boxing live on Thursday night,
right? And
from the Olympic.
Yeah, she threw down the gauntlet there.
And they called her bluff, and she says either you have both wrestling and boxing, or we go. And they said, "Well, it's been nice."
Yeah, that's somebody was going to lose in that bet. You know what I mean? And they called her bluff.
Absolutely.
So that was pretty much that. But
yeah,
you
I was heartbroken. Oh, God, I remember the night I turned on to watch wrestling as usual on Channel 5 and some B movie was playing, and I was like crestfallen when I thought there was no goodbye show or anything. Just one night you turned it on, and it's gone.
I could see poor little Kurt Brown in his room sitting there flipping on the wrestling program. It's not on. What the holy hell, what the hell just happened? Looking at the clock, did I get something wrong? Is there a battery in the clock? What's going on here? Unfortunately, no, man. That's happened to me a time or two over the years with when wrestling fell out of favor in the early to mid 90s and the new fall seasons came about, and all of a sudden my program wasn't on anymore. And I said, what the heck happened? Yes. So it was, I've been through it too. Not so much like you, because that was your wrestling program. That's all you guys had. Well, you had a little more because you guys had that satellite network. I know, like they would bring in All Japan Women. You guys would get Lucha Libre. So you guys had a little of Titanes and El Ring. I mean, you guys had quite a few random things go through your world.
We had quite the buffet. It was a total buffet. And we still had the Wednesday night shows, which came live.
Yeah.
So, and that was in Spanish, but that didn't matter to me, even though my Spanish still sucks. If you're promoting a good product, you don't really need to, at least at that time, you didn't need to understand what they were specifically talking about.
Yeah.
The action was told in the ring, or even somebody cutting a very passionate promo in Spanish, they're pissed and want revenge. So, I mean, there were still a lot of fans. I mean, when I say fans, I mean gringo fans who would still watch it, but I bet you they lost. I bet they lost a huge audience when Channel 13 folded. In '76, Channel 52, one of the UHF stations out of Corona, started airing it again, but it just wasn't the same feel.
Yeah, we're going to I'm going to get back into TV here with you in a little bit, because you talk about losing, the English speaking stuff, but we'll talk a little bit more about what happens here in the early 80s with the Spanish side of things as well. But before we do that, we were talking about a couple of those independent promotions that popped up there, the Six Amigos with Gory Guerrero, Karl Lauer and whatnot. And then again, this company who had been running some boxing fights, they're now running professional wrestling in the Olympic, as well as another promotion you just touched on a little bit ago when you were talking about some of those companies, Azteca, who reportedly began running at the Olympic as well in the fall of 81. Now, that's the time frame I have here. I don't know if that's 100% accurate, but somewhere around the fall of 1981. And they're going to run their course as well by the end of the year. So they only last about 4 or 5 months themselves. So I got to ask you, and you hate hypothetical questions, but I'm going to ask you this anyway. So Azteca, Six Amigos, we've got these other promotions trying to run. We've got LeBell still in the city. What was you said there were hot matches, these other independent promotions, at least one of them had some TV for a little bit. So with all these big names, they're spread across. There's talent in every single one of these promotions, by the way. What was the downfall? Was it oversaturation because LA was already taking a dive on the LeBell side? Was it just a downtime? Were people just sick of wrestling? And I'm asking you as a fan, not as a businessman or a promoter, just you observing that, watching it around you and having all the knowledge you have now. What would you say, in your hypothetical opinion now, would be one of the major reasons why nothing was clicking long term? Because it sounds like they were bringing in some crowds and things were working, but just it didn't work out for anybody at the time.
Yeah, I do believe if they really focused more on the Latino fans, and when I say they, I mean the LeBells, I think they could have kept afloat. Not just kept afloat, I think they could have thrived somewhat, because when they brought Mil Moscars in, there was always a bump in attendance.
Right.
Attendance went up. But I saw if they had a card that had 4 or 5 of the names from Mexico, the crowds went up also. There is one show in 82 I remember, and I kicked myself for not knowing exactly when this was. I want to say it was the night that the Villanos wrestled the Missionaries of Death in this 6-man tag match. That was just this beautiful bloodbath, and a lot of good high spots in it too.
Wow.
But I'll never forget, they began the evening Japan style, like Japan would do when they would start a tour. The wrestlers all came in with, and were handed flowers, all lined around, inside the ring. They played the Rocky theme, and the wrestlers had a box full of these, little like styrofoam balls that were autographed by some of the wrestlers, and they were throwing them out into the crowd. And I remember the friend I was with, Lloyd Lee, we were looking at this and just going, oh my God, this is like way cool. And I don't know what he thought, but I was kind of naively thinking, might this be the beginning of like an upswing? Sure. I hated giving up hope back then.
Oh, absolutely. But as a wrestling fan, you don't want to give up hope.
Exactly. And whichever show it was, I know it was one of the ones that had a lot of the fellows from Mexico. And I remember having a great time that night too.
Oh, wow.
I mean, there was so much potential. My opinion is Mike LeBell just was looking at the dollar sign, and when Vince McMahon offered him X amount, LeBell was getting older, and
sure,
I'm sure he probably just wanted to retire and play and, do whatever else made him money. I think that was, from people I talked to who knew Mike LeBell, it was almost like his hobby, just making more money.
Well, no, yeah, we've talked about that in the past. Gene LeBell was always big into the wrestling business, we know, but Mike was kind of the business side of things. He was the money-making side of it. Didn't have to be pro wrestling, could have been anything.
Yeah.
And that was, his interest. He wasn't interested in a match flow or a storylines or anything of that nature. It was go get a booker and he could handle it. We talked about in the past, the Cowboy, Bill Watts, would bring in a booker, but it still had to go through Bill at the end of the day. Even Vince, if he listened to Pat Patterson or whomever, it still had to go through Vince. And yes, I know Vince is not the most loved guy in the world right now, but he was still there to kind of go, but maybe not this. And there was a lot of promoters that were able to do that. Whereas it didn't seem like that was the case here in LA. And that might have been part of the demise as well, was just having no rein, no idea of when to pull back the reins on one of the bookers or one of their ideas, or this isn't getting over, or this might work. And it felt like we needed a new blood booker. And it felt, instead they were bringing in a lot of the old guard, which really hadn't moved past their old ways, because you've heard it said time and time again, a booker only knows their way to book. And as long as it works, then they're successful. And when it doesn't work, then they move on.
And also whatever tool, whatever tools they have too. Tom Renesto got a lot of criticism, as a booker, including me at the time. I was like, God, what's this guy doing? But he only had so much tools to work with.
Yeah.
Also, being the booker, I'll never forget one night we were hanging with Bobby Lane and Luis Mariscal, doing a feud at the time. But we were hanging with him at Lloyd's apartment one night, and everybody's talking Renesto this, Renesto that, how his booking sucks. And Bobby Lane, who grew up in a wrestling family, actually said, we got to stop though for a minute and say, who else wants his job? He says, I certainly don't want his job. He says, I don't think he's doing good work, but he is responsible for everything. Somebody no-shows, wrestlers having a hissy fit about going over or their pay. Renesto is the one who has to deal with it. And, it's when you're fantasy booking, you are fantasy booking.
Right.
It's like, I could tell you what it's like to be an indie wrestler who works hard at playing hard, but I have no idea what it's like trying to save your pennies and sharing a car with 5 people and sneaking 5 people into a hotel room because you're running low. Are you going to stay booked, or do you have to go to another territory? Does that territory want you? I got to work hard at playing hard. I never had to worry about anything. If a promoter didn't want to use me, well, they didn't want to use me. I had a day job. And, so Renesto really had only so many tools to work with. I remember we've mentioned this guy before, and I think we should mention him again, the late Tom Hankins, who was wrestling as Charlie Reed. He and his wrestling brother, Perry Reed, they had been wrestling for Ripper Leone, but weren't getting much booking. So when they went to Tom Renesto says, I'm just going to level with you guys. I can use you, but the pay here is shit. And he says, and I can't guarantee you how long some of the towns are going to stay around, but he said, we can use you. And I think Tom was a critic of Tom Renesto, but he also kind of saw the forest for the trees and acknowledged that he was saying, hey, look at what I'm up against. Didn't have much of a budget. And like I said, like Bobby Lane said, fantasy bookers should stay fantasy bookers because it's fun. Being a real booker, I think, is a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a lot more than throwing some shit down on a piece of paper and hoping it sticks. That's for sure. There's a whole lot more to it than booking a creative angle. There's a lot more to take into consideration. So, before I wanted to move on and talk to you a little bit about losing some of the announcers here, the Spanish announcers, and what kind of impact that might have had here in some of the notes I have. But before we do, you mentioned Ripper Leone, and he had another independent promotion at the time up there somewhere and thereabouts. And I know you used to attend those shows, I believe, if I remember correctly.
Love those shows.
So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about those then, please?
We discovered those in 1981. 1981 was a fun year. I had just moved back down from Oregon, and one of the people who worked for LeBell told Lloyd that I hear Anton Leone is running Strongbow Stadium in Bakersfield on Saturday night. So it's just funny thinking back on this, what a leap of faith we had, because there was no internet then.
Right.
It wasn't exactly hard or easy to get info on a rogue wrestling group whose TV was way out of your area. Sure. It was a couple hours away from the LA area. So just one Saturday night, we said, let's go to Bakersfield and see if Strongbow Stadium has wrestling. And we actually went late afternoon, and Mrs. Strongbow, Jules Strongbow's widow, was selling us our tickets. Oh, I remember. It wasn't such a leap of faith because we actually called the arena earlier and
you used your noggin.
Some seats.
There you go.
Yeah, the reason I remember this so well is when we came up to buy our tickets, Mrs. Strongbow says, "Oh, you must be the boys who called from L.A." And like, wow. Thank you for coming here. So she had some involvement with the Ripper. I don't know what, but I remember she's a really sweet lady. And so we went inside the arena. We were like the first fans there. We were just chomping at the bit to see some wrestling. And we're thinking, who's going to be on the card? Because there was no program. There was no flyers or anything.
Wrestling.
Yeah, we're sitting there, and first thing we see is Pat Barrett enter the arena.
All right.
And not long after that, Zulu, Ron Pope.
Yeah.
Then we saw, John Tolis come in and went, "Oh my God, Tolis is here! How bitchin' is this?" Not Ripper Collins. Boy, I'm getting really nostalgic. No, Victor Rivera is in the room, and what was more fun than the wrestling that night is we wanted to see who, because we had watched the babyface and the heel dressing room and kept on seeing who's going to walk out and just kind of roam the arena before all the fans are here. See, there's Ken Wayne, Roger Kirby. It was like a who's who of journeymen. Tony Rocco, who is probably one of my 5 favorite journeymans in history. And on top of that, they had TV. I mean, live TV. It was just incredible. And, well, I think it was the 3rd or 4th visit where John Tolis asked us if we would give Dr. Jerry Graham a ride home.
Oh.
And that changed my life's narrative for the better. I know a lot of people would say, well, Dr. Jerry Graham's involvement in my life was not for the better, but it was for me.
Well, it's your life, Vandal, so you get to decide. And, I'll play right along with whatever you say there. It certainly changed your life. I don't know for the better or for the worse, but it certainly changed your life to make it far more intriguing. Let's put it that way.
It was. And I said this on Brian Solomon's show a few years ago. I remember around that time I was talking with Mickey Doyle on the phone, and we were talking about the doc, and it kind of hit me when I was talking to Mickey, and I told him, you know what, it's weird. All rationale says you should stay away from this guy, but I kept on going back to hang with him, and what was it? And, I was like many 19-year-olds, probably in any generation, I wasn't sure what to do with myself, but I definitely felt like I had a broken wing of some sort, like I didn't fit in quite anywhere. There was no fit for Vandal. And it was strange, and I don't mean this in a look at how bad he's got it way, but I saw this guy who, his mother was well off. Dr. Jerry Graham had a really rich mother, not Rockefeller rich, but he grew up on the land with a lot of property. He didn't grow up impoverished, let's put it that way.
Sure.
Then he got rich wrestling. Then he lost it all and was living in flop houses, but he kept going. He never tapped out. And yeah, there are most of the lessons you can learn from Doc were what not to do.
Gotcha.
But every now and then there'd be a little bit of wisdom in Dr. Jerry Graham's, noggin.
Sure. Yeah. I
And
have to
like I
imagine
said, I'm not saying that as a way of saying, oh my God, that guy was so out of control, not degrading him, but I was somebody who felt so I lacked so much confidence. I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. And for some reason I said, well, you can fall really hard and still get up, which was a lesson I had a hard time learning.
Well, that would definitely be the place to learn that lesson from, I'd have to say, being able to experience, the legendary Jerry Graham, but at the same time, learn some lessons, whether he was teaching them to you or not, or teaching the wrong thing or not.
Yes.
At least you chose to learn it the correct way.
Yes. And, Another comment on that is I remember a few years ago, my friend Dan Farron, who the 605 News Group knows as the late Dan Farron, even though he is still living.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking about a mutual friend who was kind of hanging around, some unseemly character, somebody he shouldn't have been hanging around. And it was obvious to everybody but that guy. And I said, why the hell does he keep, giving his friend chances? Why is he doing this when, the guy just makes his life complicated? And Dan said, Kurt says, every one of us have had a Dr. Jerry Graham in their life. And he said, nobody else will understand it. And I'm not one of these guys who's trying to excuse what the doc did. I understand why a lot of people hated him. He did some bad things, but I loved him.
Sure.
And I do think people have someone like in their life. I think for me, the one thing was it was definitely a conditional friendship. I shared all my secrets with him except for my home phone number and address because I saw what happens to people who would give that information to them.
That was a smart feller right there. Very good. Very good. I love it. So
yeah. And I still don't know how he got my brother's phone number. I'll never forget.
Oh, boy.
My brother Dirk, my late brother who passed away a few years ago, but was what a good bro. He got a call one night and goes, hey, I'm looking for Kirk. I was always Kirk to him. He never got Kirk down. But, hey, where's Kirk? And my brother Dirk is, well, he doesn't live here. He lives down the street. And he goes, tell him I got to, well, who's this? You're his brother? And he goes, yeah, I'm his brother. And then he goes, can Kirk beat you wrestling? And he goes, nah, Kirk could never beat me wrestling. And I remember my brother, he didn't like wrestling at all, but he did get a kick out of the doc.
Yeah,
and
I would imagine.
So almost every time I would see him, the doc would say, have you beaten Dirk wrestling yet? and then I would just say oh, nope, he's tough. I'm working on it, doc. I want to hear that you beat Dirk wrestling. So 10 years later, I hadn't seen the doc at the time, it was maybe a year since I had seen him.
Mm-hmm.
And I found where he is staying in Glendale. And I went up there and he was there with his son, Mike, who I had not seen in a good 5 years. And we're talking for 20 minutes. And after all this time, he says, have you beaten Dirk at wrestling yet? And then I just started laughing and I'm saying, we fought to a draw. And again, he's changed the narration of my life. He says to his son, Mike, hey, this guy's got a brother, Dirk. They're twin brothers, Kirk and Dirk, and Kirk can't beat him wrestling yet. And for the record, he was 12 years older than me, but
sure.
If Doc says we are twins, then Dirk was my twin. I love you up there, Dirk. I hope you're doing well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. All right. So we've got another name to add to your list here. Kirk Brown, part of the show here this week.
Yeah, I forgot. That's another alias I've had.
We can do that. So I'm glad I asked the Ripper Leone question. You had a lot come out of that then to get to go watch some new wrestling up there. What would have went wrong? Were you privy enough to know with that company what went wrong with them? You said they had TV. They sound like they had quite a few decent talents and old timer legends from that era or area. So what would have went wrong there?
Ripper Leone, you would not guess it if you saw him. He seemed like a character out of a 1930s gangster flick or something.
Yeah.
He was always chomping on a cigar, had this beret on, wore these really cheap suits, and always came to the arena with his trusty friend Jake, his bulldog.
Okay.
And so he'd always pull up in back of Strongbow Stadium late afternoon, and you'd hear him get out of the car and say, "Come on, Jake." And he and Jake would waddle into Strongbow Stadium. And then we just peeked into his car, and the two things he had besides his bulldog Jake to travel with was the Holy Bible and a pile of Jim Neighbors tapes.
Wow.
The Ripper, a Jim Neighbors fan.
Who would know?
I wish I could have ridden with him just to hear him sing along. But
wow.
gosh, the best person you could probably talk about him to would be somebody like Ed Moretti, who worked for him. It's funny because if you talk to him, you would not think that he owned a small chain of pizza parlors, and I think he had a dry cleaning business that, made him a good buck. But he was somewhere in between with the times and past the times when it came to promoting wrestling. He had good TV in Bakersfield. They drew good crowds. I think Strongbow Stadium seated around 2,000 people, maybe.
Okay.
And when they had TV, the place was at least half full, which, considering the TV was weak in just transmission, not the quality. The quality was actually quite good.
Okay.
But I remember at the end of 1981, he decided, we're going to do it without TV. They charge too much. And I think it was Moretti. Ed, I forget if you told me this or somebody else, but they'd say, Ripper, like, that's the key, that's our key advertisement is.
Right.
He said, no, we don't need TV. And they also he didn't do much in the way of advertising very much. I think maybe a little plug in, the Bakersfield Californian or something like that.
If you don't advertise, they don't know you're there. And especially without TV, like you said.
No, that's exactly what happened.
Wow. Okay.
They had, the crowds they had after TV was dropped were the diehards, the people who were there every week originally. And they were decent crowds, but not enough to sustain him. And I think he just got tired of doing business. He was, I think, around 73 at the time.
Okay. Yeah, that's some serious old school mentality. I mean, to feel that you could run a wrestling company without the use of television to promote it, when every territory on earth, the first thing they did was, go out and try to get some TV. If they lost TV, like LeBell has with the English speaking version, we see the decline. So it shows you how important it is. And it
seems like a common thread with promoters who have been successful for years. They just don't accept that times are changing. It would be like if I tried promoting 10 years ago and thought the internet is nothing. I mean, it's not the key source of advertising, but digital age, it'll pass. I do remember a number of older wrestlers thinking that this WWF stuff is a fad. It's the new hula hoop. It'll be big for a while. And I think a lot of people didn't like accepting the fact that, times change.
Right.
Relive the glory days of Memphis wrestling with the Retro Wrestling Review USWA podcast. Each week, we go back in time to review USWA Championship Wrestling from the 1990s, episode by episode. Join us for watch-alongs, behind-the-scenes stories, and exclusive interviews with people who were there and lived it. Whether you grew up watching it or you're discovering it for the first time, this podcast is your ringside seat to Memphis wrestling history. It's all a part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Listen now at USWApodcast.com.
Hey guys, Ray Russell back to talk to you about all the new and exciting audio and video podcasts we've been putting together over at patreon.com/WrestleCopia. As a self-funded brand, this entire ship is powered by our patrons. It's your support that keeps all of these wonderful shows going here at WrestleCopia. And with that said, I wanted to mention that we now have 3 major tiers with tons of Patreon-exclusive next-level content for our Patreon supporters. And it all starts with the $5 all-access tier, which gets you early access to many of the weekly podcasts, at least a dozen monthly digital downloads for your viewing and reading pleasure, the insanely detailed show notes for the Wrestling Memory Grenade Regional Rasslin, and the OG Monday Warfare podcast, plus random bonus video drops, archived old-school audio watch-alongs from the early years of the brand. And if that's not all, the brand new Patreon-exclusive podcast, Ranting Raw, featuring yours truly, Ray Russell, completely uncensored, unfiltered, with honest takes, taking patron questions and addressing various topics from throughout wrestling history. It is a whole lot of fun wrapped under the all-access tier for only $5, but things get even hotter with the VIP Superfan tier. For just a few dollars more, you get everything already mentioned in the all-access tier, Plus, as part of the VIP tier, a whole new slew of videocast series where it's not just your typical watch-alongs. Sure, we laugh, we have fun, but we're also breaking down the history, the context, and the why behind what you're seeing. And as part of the VIP tier, you have access to Dan Ginnity's Puro Resu Academy videocast, the Coliseum videocast with co-host Gene Jackson, and the Monday Warfare videocast, Raw vs. Nitro, breaking down the history of the Monday Night War. Plus, you also get the Memphis 1985 folder of goodies and all show notes for the Puro Academy podcast and Gene's retro review show. Lots to be had there at the VIP tier. But wait, there's more. For those WrestleCopia backers who crave even more from the brand, we bring you yet another level of content fit for a warrior, because it is indeed the ultimate tier, which gives you everything from the All Access Pass, everything from the VIP tier, plus you will receive access to the big ones video series featuring a lengthy look and discussion into some of the biggest pay-per-views, super shows, and other events from throughout wrestling history. It's also a great place to keep up with the big events that coincide with the Monday Warfare videocast and so many other big events from years gone by. You'll also have access to the newest big hit to the Copia brand. I'm talking about Regional Rasslin Unreal, the video series. Get ready for the next level in Regional Rasslin as we dissect territory history in video form. Watch along with us. But still, even more for your money, guys. You'll also receive access to the Treasure Chest, which offers patrons the unique opportunity to download and watch select rarities from wrestling history. And for those of you who are wondering what we offer, are contemplating joining a paid Patreon membership, or simply a curious lurker, a reminder there's a free tier at our Patreon that you can join as well. Remember, guys, no subscription, cancel any time, but I think you'll like the content that we're offering there for any budget you may have. And you can sign up right now, patreon.com/WrestleCopia, or look for the QR code where available. We appreciate your support in helping us pay the bills to keep the WrestleCopia podcast network running and enabling us to continue to bring you all of the quality programming that we offer.
This is Wrestling Nostalgia, the podcast that dives into wrestling history. Hey, wrestling fans, I'm Dave Dynasty, and if you enjoy podcasts that are knowledgeable and history-driven, then Wrestling Nostalgia is for you. With great guests and fun interviews, there are over 200 episodes in our archives. We chat with several first-time guests and often cover topics not discussed on other podcasts. Look up Wrestling Nostalgia on your favorite podcast platform and visit all of our links at linktree/WrestlePod. That is linktr.ee/RASSLEPOD. And remember, wherever you go, whatever you do, be good, be safe, and keep on growing.
I'm glad I asked you about Ripper Leone. I'm glad you brought him up because I totally forgot, because you mentioned him in the past episode, and I'm glad we got to some of that. And hopefully maybe down the line I can maybe dig out some results for at least a few of those cards. We could talk about some of the things that were going on there in regards to the talent you talked about coming through there. But as I mentioned before, and you kind of touched on this already also earlier in the program, Vandal, we were talking about the loss of the English-speaking TV, but there were also changes being made on the Spanish side. And I wanted to read this to you here and give you Jeff Walton's take, and then get to your take on this. Mm-hmm. Back in late December of 1980, 4 months after losing English-language television, Mike LeBell had ceased holding Wednesday night TV tapings at the Olympic. From that point on, the matches that were aired on Channel 34's TV show were from the Friday night cards 8 days prior. The whole purpose of a wrestling TV show was to motivate fans to attend house shows, where they'd have to pay to see the matches. Now, with the ability to watch the top 2 matches of every card for free, as little as 8 days later on television, there was little incentive for fans to brave Friday night's traffic in Los Angeles and spend money for tickets to the live Olympic cards. And Jeff Walton says basically the LeBells were just making money off the TV. He was making money, but his wrestlers were not. The further decrease in attendance at the live event cards meant even smaller payoffs for the talent. And in May of 1981, that issue was compounded when the expenditures of running a live wrestling card increased dramatically for Mike LeBell. Of course, we talked about losing the Olympic there for a while, but that's an interesting point Jeff Walton brings up there. Basically, yeah, like you said, Vandal, Mike was making money from the TV, so he was getting paid either way. Unfortunately, the boys are getting paid off the house, and there's no house, and that's the problem.
I think that was probably the worst payoff they ever got, because I remember guys that if I talked to somebody who worked LeBell in the 70s, they said, the money wasn't like the best payoff they got, but it was good. And they were able to get a nice apartment. I think there was like an apartment that, I don't know if the owner was a friend of the LeBells or something, but wrestlers got good rates at the apartment. So the travel schedule wasn't chaotic like places like Watts' territory or Tennessee. You still had time to get up in the morning and go lay on the beach, which was just down the street. I mean, to this day, Jack Armstrong still lives like within a stone's throw from the beach.
Okay.
So yeah, there were some advantages working LA in the 70s. It wasn't going to make you rich, but it wasn't terrible either.
And even Tom Pritchard said, on his podcast at some point, that even though it was supposed to be a quick stop through LA to Portland, he was kind of conned into staying in Los Angeles. But by the time he figured out he was conned, he was like, yeah, the money sucks, but you know what? I'm in LA, there's beaches, there's beautiful women, and I don't really need a whole lot of money right now, so I'll do this thing and he was there for basically, I think, at least a year. So I get where there's some perks to it as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I knew one wrestler, I don't know if you'd want me telling this, but I knew one wrestler who was living out of their car in 81. This was like the last half of the year. And he said it was like help of a couple of other wrestlers where they would pool their money just to get a hotel room and a hot plate and cook stuff up. It was just like, wow. So yeah, the wrestlers, in my opinion, weren't treated well. I can't say that firsthand, but just people I talked to. But when Tom Pritchard was there, he was there until I think early 1981. So it really, the payoffs were decent enough for a while, but probably the last 3/4 of the year, not so good.
Okay. Well, I would be remiss as we finish up some of the stories here, the backstage, behind-the-scenes happenings of 1981. I do have a few for 1982 as we continue on, but before we close out 81 completely, we talked a lot about the Monster on the last episode, both his heel run and his babyface turn and working Andre the Giant and everything in between. It was a fun conversation. Vandal got to witness the Monster up front and personal there right at ringside. And, I got a note here from one of the listeners who was talking a little bit about how the face turn happened. We didn't really go into that, and I didn't have it in my notes, but apparently the storyline goes like this. I just want to put this out there for everybody who was curious. How do they turn the Monster babyface? October 18th, 1981, Carlos Mata battled the Great Goliath in a match where the stipulation was that if Mata won, Tom Renesto, the booker, would get the Monster's contract, so Renesto would be the manager of the Monster. And so I guess Carlos Mata wins the match, and Renesto had the Monster turn babyface. And the Monster then feuded with the Great Goliath and was now controllable enough where the promotion held a Monster Camera Night where the fans, including...
Monster Camera Night.
Yes, you were talking about that, I think. I didn't
go.
No, but you told me about it.
My biggest regret. One of my biggest regrets is I didn't go to Monster Camera Night to get my picture taken with the Monster, because he's a nice monster now. Tom Renesto, as I recall, learned to control him with a little flashlight. And with those LeBell payoffs, it was probably a very cheap flashlight.
Hopefully it had batteries in it,
And then the Monster turns evil again because you thought it was generic batteries. Damn it.
That's why we need the Energizer Bunny. That would have been a great Energizer Bunny commercial.
I hope somewhere the interviews with Tom Renesto still exist where I can't remember what the stipulation was, but once the Monster thoroughly turned face, I think he is having maybe a loser leave town or something.
Yeah.
And the Monster is on camera with Tom Renesto, and the Monster would do stuff like pat Renesto on the shoulder or maybe brush some dirt off his suit just to show this guy's so nice to me, and I'm very loyal to him now. But Renesto was saying, it really does concern me if he was to lose this match and leave town. I've grown very fond of him, and I want to watch out for him. And at the time, I was saying, oh, Christ, what is this? But in hindsight, it was beautiful. It was awesome. And they did have Salvador Lothario early in '82 as his rival, Bigfoot.
Yes, Bigfoot. Who was Bigfoot?
Salvador Lothario, who was the brother of Jose Lothario.
Yes, okay.
And he was under the hood a few different gimmicks. He was one of these guys who 90% of the time he would do the job on TV, but every now and then he'd get a remarkable win. There was a huge upset when he and La Pantera Negra got the tag straps from Gordon and Goliath in 71 or 72. And the reason I remember that so well is because the introduction to the Wednesday night Spanish station show was one of the classic mariachi songs. I can't remember which one it is, but they showed footage from that match, and both Salvador Lothario and Pantera Negra were just bloody as all hell.
Oh, wow.
Totally juicing it, and they showed them winning the titles. So that was a smart thing LeBell did back in the day, is he would keep you guessing. You knew there's only a 10% chance that John Burrich or Mondo Lopez was going to get their hand raised, but it occasionally did happen.
Yeah, I've noticed that in the results. I've noticed that in title changes. Even if it's just for a couple weeks, they would do that.
Yeah, I thought that was really smart. I mean, it definitely kept me glued to the TV because I said, I think I know what's going to happen, but not necessarily. The other cool thing is in those early 70 years, they had a title called the Beat the Champ title, and it was only defended on Channel 13 Saturday nights. And it was sponsored by, it was like a store for big, tall, and hefty gentlemen. Bars,
okay.
Clothing. They were the sponsorship for the Beat the Champ title. Okay. And so the premise is anybody could get a title chance. They would spin a wheel each Saturday night, and it was just random who next week's opponent to try to get the title would be.
Wow.
So you could have somebody as, like John Burrich, who, jobbed pretty much more than all the jobbers, along with El Negro, I think was the other one who rarely got the win. He scored an upset over Butcher Brannigan. I'm kind of going to stray territory here, but one of the reasons you watched every Saturday was, the premise was whoever's the champion has to defend it every Saturday night.
Sure.
And there's like a $500 purse if you win it. And for every week the title is defended, the value of the title goes up. Next week it's $600, $700. I think at one time it was like $1,500, and you got to remember this was like 1972.
Mm-hmm.
And, it kind of, added a little story to the twist, and also could kind of showcase some of the lesser stars, Mondo Lopez, Pantera Negra, I know held it for a while. Pantera Negra was a guy who was kind of a tweener, neither jobber nor champion.
Okay.
But no, it was a reason to watch, and it would involve the people like Tolis, who was on top. Tolis feuded with Tony Rocco for the belt, and they didn't really feud on the Friday night shows. It's kind of like there were two things being promoted: what's on TV next week, and what's at the Olympic this Friday. It was a fun time.
Yeah, well, I love that anything can happen aspect. Obviously, you don't do it every week, or it just becomes too much. But when you pull that out from time to time, it reminds you of what's possible, which is anything is possible in the territory. And unlike some of the other territories growing up, I remember watching wrestling as a kid. My dad, who had watched wrestling when he was a kid, but not as an adult, he would come in the room and say, "What do you want to watch that for? You already know who's going to win and he was right, because it was just a bunch of squash matches."
Yes.
And 99.9% of the time, it rarely ever was there a way that the babyface or the job guy would go over, unless it was maybe a disqualification or something of that nature. But, obviously in the LA territory, it sounds like they did a lot of that, and I saw that in not just the results, like I said, but even a few title changes were kind of, oh, okay, I see what they did there. So It's a way to keep people guessing. It's a way to get somebody over, even if for a month. This guy who's been jobbing for a year, oh my God, Horowitz wins, if you will, and they give him the little brief push, and they ride the wave until it starts to die down, and then you move on. But brilliant booking, really, at the end of the day, if you can pull something like that off. It really was. Mm-hmm.
And another thing that really intrigues me with hindsight is I remember when I started corresponding with people from other territories in the late 70s, they would roll their eyes whenever you mentioned the Battle Royal, because like in Portland, they would have a Battle Royal for no reason.
Yeah.
Like I remember going to Eugene one night and they opened the match with a Battle Royal. Nobody cared. One, they're having a Battle Royal. Why? And Portland was a great territory, but they said, we're having a Battle Royal here. I didn't see any belt, no prize, didn't see even a package of M&Ms or something for the winner to munch on. So I didn't realize that Battle Royals were just kind of old hat in a lot of territories, but I believe it's LeBell who was but taking from Roy Shire's book. Roy Shire had an annual Battle Royal in January that was the card of the year. Yeah. Mike LeBell did the same thing for this territory. It was the highlight of the year, and usually it would sell out, and up until the last maybe 81, 82, it still drew really well. But what I found intriguing was the way they pitched it. The prize was $22,000. This was 1972. But they made it sound like the wrestlers had even more invested, because he said to be in the Battle Royal, you have to, be licensed by the Athletic Commission, yada, yada, and you must pitch in $500. They said $11,000 is the NWA's money. The other $11,000 is from the wrestlers. Everybody has to put in $500 to enter the Battle Royal.
Okay.
The other thing, and I know some other territories did that, back in that day, if you threw somebody over the top rope, you got disqualified. It was considered a very dangerous move, and when wrestlers did get thrown over the top rope, they'd really sell it and limp back to the dressing room. Well, here they are with the Battle Royal, where the only way you win is to throw people over the top rope.
That's right, yeah, absolutely.
So you put danger and money into it, and for all the kitschy mistakes that the LeBell territory did, they did some really fascinating stuff too. I started watching a little too late for the Tolis Blassie Coliseum show, but it was still hot when I watched it, and it was a Saturday night necessity. It was my life's blood at the time.
No, yeah, the unpredictability is great in the Battle Royal. I grew up, nowadays everybody rips on the Battle Royal. They say it's just a bunch of guys throwing forearms, but I say if you book a Battle Royal properly, like some territories did, it was very meaningful. And I enjoyed the Battle Royal growing up because, it was the good guy's going to hit another good guy, or the heel's going to rake the other heel's eyes. You didn't get to see that because they were so one-sided. It was every man for himself. So I was a huge Battle Royal kid, I should say. And
somebody would do something. There'd be two guys, neither who won the Battle Royal, but somewhere one of the wrestlers would do something really cheesy to the other guy to eliminate him, and that would start a feud in itself.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you could do so much with the Battle Royal if you booked it properly. It was very meaningful. People, crap on it today, but that's because nobody books it like it should be booked today. It is a guy throwing forearms and jumping out, seeing how fast they can jump out. It's a different world today, I guess. But I'm a big Battle Royal guy as well. I wanted to share a story with you from Jeff Walton in regards to early 80s Andre the Giant and how he had changed over time by this point. And then we'll move into 1982 here in the program. This goes back to Caesars in Tahoe. Jeff says that Andre was so out of it on the day of the matchup that in the evening when they had the matches, Andre fell all over his own feet in the ring while wrestling the great Goliath. Luckily, it was Goliath he was in the ring with, because Goliath ended up making Andre look good. Finally, Andre the Giant sits on Goliath for the win, but he won't get off. The president of Caesars then comes up. The president of Caesars comes up to the ringside and tells Jeff Walton, "I don't want you guys in my hotel ever again. He is clearly drunk. I set this thing up with the kids," and we'll get to that in a minute, "and he really disappointed the kids. Jeff says he apologized, but regardless, it was an unfortunate event that not only disappointed a group of kids, but led to the loss of an outlet for the Hollywood wrestling office. Jeff says you could see there were changes in Andre the Giant. And what he's referencing there with the kids, Andre was supposed to meet with a bunch of children prior to the event, and Jeff states that was the deal they had made, but Andre was so wasted by the time he got to the building that Jeff had made up a story, maybe perhaps, that Andre wasn't feeling well. And it was, maybe he wasn't for good reason. And so this is just kind of like they talk about, we've heard the stories of Andre could be two different people, not just if he liked you or he didn't like you, but, sometimes, he'd sit there and play his cards or whatnot. And other times he was a grumpy giant. Certainly by the 1980s, he wasn't getting around as easily, and he could have these issues with his drinking as well. But just another interesting story there, though, is they set up a deal. Andre's supposed to come in, meet with this group of kids. I can't remember the backstory of who they were, but he basically blows it off. Tell them I'm not coming, boss. And that was the end of that. Works the match drunk. So it's unfortunate to hear those kind of stories, but it's always interesting to hear those kind of stories at the same time.
Absolutely. I remember hearing several versions of that story, which were greatly embellished, but I would say Walton's version is the correct one.
The most believable. It's not.
Somebody was saying he was so drunk that he was running around naked or something like that.
Well,
nah, that never happened.
I don't know if 1980s Andre was running around anywhere, but no, naked?
He wasn't running any place.
Well, I mean, I guess we could wrap up 1981, put a bow on that, move into 1982, and look at some of the newcomers and talent coming through the territory at this point. Arriving in February of 82, oh my, the exotic Adrian Street and the lovely Miss Linda right by his side. Tell me your memories of the exotic one.
I was so excited when he came here. I was the only person in the arena who was on cloud nine that I was going to get to see Adrian Street, because I was probably the only American teenager who, for 3 years, loyally bought Ring Sport magazine, the British wrestling magazine. And also, since I was corresponding with Tom Burke, I would get some of the other publications they had. And every time I saw Adrian Street, I said, holy shit, this is ahead of its time. This guy is
no
cool.
kidding. Yeah.
So I remember when he came here to the States, I heard he was going to be there. Well, first I was excited because he was in Mexico wrestling for UWA right before he came to LA.
Oh, wow.
But when he came to LA, I was just like on cloud nine. And I remember I was friends with him and Linda for a while. Very nice people. But my God, it was like, oh my God, does Santa Claus know I have a wrestling wish list? Because what are the odds anybody from England would, come and, roost in LA for, how long was he here? I think about 7 months.
He was there for a good chunk of 82. Yeah.
Yeah. We used to visit him and Linda a lot. I mean, you could you ask probably any wrestler, even some fans will tell you, if Adrian and Linda invited you to their place, you got great treatment. We'd come in and we'd say, hey, we're hungry. Let's go get something. Adrian would just say, no, let's not eat junk food. And he'd actually cook us like a whole wheat pizza, something like that.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Well, again, really ahead of his time. There weren't a lot of people doing that back then.
So ahead of his time. Yeah. Initially, he didn't, as a heel, he didn't get over at first. And he started to get over as a heel, but eventually they did turn him babyface. Just how can you hate him?
Unfortunately, growing up in the 1980s, being up, in Ohio, we didn't get to see Adrian Street on anything because he never made it to Crockett. He never made it to, Vince Land. There's stories that Vince tried to hire him as a manager, but he would have had to change his entire gimmick, and he didn't want to do that. And so,
right.
Adrian Street here, though, he was in the magazines. What a great character for magazines. And you asked, of all the wrestlers from England, what are the odds that he comes? I think Adrian Street was perfectly made for American wrestling with that gimmick. But I would, just look at the magazines and marvel, at the character, the makeup, the hair, the job, and having Miss Linda dress in the, interesting clothing and things of that nature. And I don't know that I ever got to see Adrian Street wrestle till he was very well past his prime when he came through the early inception of the global wrestling on ESPN. Now, he might have come through something I saw him on before that, but I just remember thinking, yes, finally, I get to see Adrian Street. And, he didn't last all that long because that was when they were paying the guys, and then they stopped paying the guys, and any of the guys were paying weren't there anymore. But it was cool to finally get to see him.
It was astounding. So I heard so many people say he's not going to get over here. He is a pretty short guy, like 5'5".
Mm-hmm.
And, that wouldn't really be much of a problem these days. But back then, his style of wrestling initially kind of, I'm talking technical wrestling, not the gimmick.
Yeah.
But it kind of didn't, how do I say, the matches looked awkward. But, I mean,
it's a different style. Really that Houdini, Johnny Eagles type style. Yeah. In the all the European stuff. Yeah, it's different. But again, if you got to acquire the taste, I suppose, over the years. I enjoy it. That's I'm into that kind of style.
Yeah,
but
I did too.
But Adrian, it goes from the gimmick, and then he would stretch somebody like a pretzel. He'd go from skipping and holding hands to stretching you into 6 ways from Sunday, going to that Bill Riley snake pit and Wigan. That'll do it every time.
No, he was really, really good. I was bummed when I heard he passed. It was funny. He was, I know people say he was a really great shooter. I think that's he was tough. Don't get me wrong, he was tough. But I think more of that was, his memory kind of adapting to the way he wanted to turn out. The first I ever heard of him was Tom Burke would send me. He knew I liked Street, so he'd send me articles. And the first article I ever read was him getting his clock clean in a dressing room that a local newspaper reported.
Oh, wow.
And that's not to say he wasn't tough, but it's funny. Everybody thinks he was like this high-level shooter. Yeah, and the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. I wouldn't have messed with him.
Well, let's put it this way. I'm sure if you fed him your arm, that would be the end of your arm. But you have to get to that point, right? Who's going to do that? Right?
And the people I've talked to, the people I've talked to who knew him said, "Oh no, it's legit." Like he said, "Put this hold on me, and I'll show you what I'll do." But
Right. Well, there you go. It's
like you said, you're being fed. You're being fed.
Yeah, but it's like Stu Hart. Give me your arm. Yeah, no thanks.
Exactly. Where me, I just say I surrender. Let's not fight.
There you go. You win.
No, yeah, but man, the way he got over here in the States was amazing. I think a lot of people were surprised.
The little footage that's out there is just great stuff in regards to, the early stuff when he first came over from Europe. But he would go on and he would continue to work here and there, Memphis, Alabama, things of that nature. So there's enough footage out Mid-South. I remember him winning. I think he wins the TV title when he kisses Terry Taylor, which shocks him. And then he schoolboys him and wins the TV belt, which I couldn't believe was a cowboy finish. I don't know who was booking for him at the time.
Yes,
you got to love it. You got to love it. So.
Even the cowboy can have an open mind.
He gets it. Man, it's green at the end of the day. You know what I mean? All right, let's look at a name. I'm going to really pick your brain here because this is a name that's been on my mind for the last quarter of a century since I first saw him in a couple of old magazines that I grabbed and some results and things like that. There was a wrestler during this time period called The Kiss, I do believe, here in the Los Angeles territory. Do you have any knowledge, any memory of this Kiss character? I've been dying to know, fill me in after 25 years of guessing.
He was a luchador. I believe he was locally trained. It was at first said that he was the son of Jose Lothario, but that wasn't true. I don't know why he said that.
Well, I've talked with Bob Roop. It's possible that he could be the son of Jose Lothario. Not the Kiss, just any gentleman out there possibly could have. He was quite the Lothario in his days, is what I'm trying to get at here.
Yeah, I asked somebody why did he do that, and people said, a lot of wrestlers did that back in the time, especially if they knew. I know Sal Lothario was a really good shooter.
Okay.
I don't know about Jose, but he probably was. And I think it was Jesse Hernandez said, sometimes guys will do that just so other guys think, well, maybe I better not mess with him in the ring.
Oh, okay.
He's the son of a shooter.
So it's not so much for the fans. It was kind of cover your ass in the locker room.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And
right.
of course, people are going to fall for that for only so long, if at all.
Sure.
But yeah, he was a local guy. He stayed local here and was on a lot of indie shows throughout the 80s. I think he has even a son or grandson who does the gimmick nowadays.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, kind of. I know Kiss would promote and kind of put himself on top, and then I think he did the same. I have to ask one of the guys like Superboy or Capitan Oro if they remember, if they know what the situation is. But yeah, you'll still hear his name come up sometimes. We always wondered, I guess LeBell TV was so like lacking visibility nationwide. Mm-hmm. We were wondering, whoa, isn't Gene Simmons and company going to slap a lawsuit on this guy?
Right, yeah,
that's what the gimmick was.
Yeah, yeah, that's why I saw the pictures and I just was like, wow, how did this go on? And it goes on for a good year-ish, I would say at the very least here. Yeah. I mean, in Los Angeles for LeBell. Now, you talked about he continued to work beyond this. I did look up his results in the past. I know he was only a couple years in the business by the time he got his break here. So that's, saying a little something. He knew somebody somewhere, get the foot in the door, and so he shows up and he gets to work for a while. He's got a gimmick, right? And it's working to some degree.
Exactly. He's not somebody I think people went home saying, "Oh my God, that guy was great," but he was good.
Did you see that Kiss guy?
He got recently.
They might have said that, but not for the proper reasons anyway. So
what's that?
I said they might have said, "Did you see the Kiss guy?" But they might have been saying it for the wrong reason. It's more about the gimmick than the wrestling.
Yes.
All right. So
he was solid.
Let's address the elephant in the room. We've talked about it a little in the past. I just want to mention it again here because we're moving into 1982 now, and that is a guy by the name of Luis Mariscal, who would be known here in the LeBell territory as Sweet Brown Sugar. And in the past, right here on this program, Vandal, you said that you had heard that actually Skip Young, the actual Sweet Brown Sugar, was pegged to come in here and work the territory, but he didn't really show up. Maybe he heard about the paydays or the lack thereof, whatever the case may be. And so they just slapped the gimmick because they'd already been promoting the name. They slapped the gimmick on the first guy they see. And I'm just saying, tongue in cheek, but Luis Mariscal gets the short straw, if you will, or maybe the large straw because he gets the main event out of this gimmick.
Yeah, I should say that's nobody told me directly that's what happened. That was my assumption. And I am still 99% certain that is what happened because I remember they did that with Mike Stallings. I think we may have talked about this on one of the previous episodes.
Yeah.
Mike Stallings was a Southern journeyman who was supposed to come in here, and they billed him, hyped him as this amazing collegiate wrestler who's only had 3 losses in his life or something like that. And you're expecting to see, like a Kurt Angle type coming out or something. Well, when the night that Mike Stallings debuted, they said it was Mike Stallings, but it was actually Chris Colt, who didn't exactly look like a collegiate wrestler.
No.
Far from it. And he still wore his, wacky Chris Colt gear, the multicolored tights and everything. And so I'm assuming that's what happened with Luis Mariscal, because again, you can't fool all the people all the time. And the local fans who knew the wrestling scene in Mexico, they damn well knew who Luis Mariscal was. He was a name there.
Yeah, he had some...
he was main eventing.
Yeah, he was main eventing. He had a couple of tag team partners, if I remember correctly, when I was digging into his past. I can't remember who they were, but you're right, absolutely right. He was certainly a name down there in Mexico by this point, which means he was all up in those magazines. So, again,
he was, during that golden era in Mexico where the Toreo shows were like a who's who of professional wrestling, not just Mexico, but Japan and the States. He was in several of the main events and a lot of the co-mains. He was a good worker. A really nice guy. Got to know him a little bit. But yeah, I was just puzzled. I never really asked the local Mexican fans, so what do you think of this? I'd love to hear what they thought. It's like if you're back east somewhere in a town that never had WWF back in the 70s, and they say Bob Backlund's coming, and
Sure.
you see Mike Boyette or something. It's just.
Yeah, I mean, well, what you gonna do? I mean, it's interesting though, right? We go back to the magazines and kind of insulting the intelligence of some of the wrestling fans, like the Twin Devil gimmick, things like that. Not saying that a wrestler can't change up their name. You could have the moniker Sweet Brown Sugar, Luis Mariscal. You could do all of that. I don't know why they didn't really pull the trigger on that, because
you can't pretend that they were a whole different entity.
Yes, right. Yeah, completely different background.
I mean, that's why that's the one hypothetical question I'd always have. The second that I'd have is, why didn't they just, try to promote lucha? I think they would have done well at it, the LeBells, if they just did straight lucha. I mean, just to show how crowd popped whenever. Not popped, but how the attendance grew every time they'd bring in a couple of names from Mexico. And that was without any extra effort, just having them on the card, advertising them. Here we are.
We talked about it already, and I mentioned it out of Ron Starr's book. He was elated when he found out he was going to do a few match program with Mil Mascaras, because he knew when he came in, it was like when the boys would say they loved working on the Hulk Hogan shows, the A shows, if you will, because they knew they were going to get a huge payday that night. And it was basically the same when Mil came to town here in LA and pretty much every territory. The gates would go up, and certainly here in Los Angeles was one of those cases. So it makes complete sense. I just don't know, like you said, there's got to be more to it, but why not pull the trigger? You're already in a heavily populated Hispanic community, so you should already kind of see some of your towns at the very least. So you should already know by this point that it would work. There's magazines on the stands. I mean, if you knew it, I can't believe that the promoters were never informed of this. Maybe they just kind of scoffed at, get away from me, boy, I know what I'm doing. But
I'm certain a lot of that happened. Well, it is funny. I remember when I did a little newsletter called Viva La Lucha around 89, 90.
Mm-hmm.
We got to interview Mil Mascaras. Pat Hood, better known as Larry Abdullah Rivera from XPW, translated for us. And, Mascaras didn't say anything that was earth-shaking or anything, just the usual interview. But he did say, he did say at some point, I have no idea why they don't try to capitalize on Lucha Libre in the LA area. There's people who have money who should know that you could, if you put a local product on TV, they will come. Not word for word. I'm
sure.
What he
no,
said,
you're paraphrasing. I get you. Absolutely, yeah.
So I'm sure there was a lot of people just kind of a xenophobia on, the American way is the right way to do it. That's the right kind of wrestling, whether it draws or not. It might lose us money, but it's the correct way.
Well, let's hit another name here before we finish up this week, and then we'll definitely take this into one more episode. We'll talk about that at the end of the program. How about, and we'll see what you got on him, and if we go through this one fast, maybe we'll hit on another name as well. But how about Diamond Timothy Flowers?
He and Bobby Lane were the first two people I actually were friends with and hung around. He was an amazing talent. I mean, as a worker, in-ring worker, he was elite, but he didn't have good people skills. Let's put it that way.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, he did not play well with others. He should have been somebody big in the business.
Oh,
but yeah.
Well,
last time I saw him was I think 1982, and I don't dread seeing him, but he's not somebody I would look up.
I might have asked you about him in the past, but I feel like I've heard that from you before. So if I repeated myself by asking you about him again, I do apologize. We don't need to go there.
Yeah, I will say though, he was his in-ring work was off the charts. If he wanted a match to shine, he could make it shine. But if somebody gave him a finish he didn't like, he would just kind of get in there and just half-ass it.
Yeah, you can't do that. You can't do that, guys.
Yeah, I know. He should have been somebody big. He was good.
I'm glad you're able to separate your history versus his talent. So we appreciate that here.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I actually have a question. Perhaps Scott Walton could ask his papa if he's listening.
All right.
or any other, if there are any other, boomers who remember the year 1977
Okay.
in L.A., Buddy Rogers wrestled here for about a month.
No kidding.
But
Okay.
it was not Buddy Rogers.
Oh,
It just looked like a buff guy from the local, Venice Beach scene.
okay.
And he kind of just did jobs for, I think, about a month and a half. And then I think they briefly pushed him before he put over, I think, Piper in the Lucha Libre town. But I always wondered who that was and what was his story.
Well, you guys heard the question. Any of you super fans from the olden days? Well, just before my birth, and while Vandal was still young in the fandom world, so I'm still a couple years shy of being born there, so I don't have a whole lot of information. But I would love, if anybody hears this, even if you guys don't have the answer, you think you might know somebody who does, reach out there on the social media platforms. Facebook has a lot of great West Coast groups, Los Angeles and things of that nature. Maybe we can get an answer to that, because I too, my interest is now peaked as well, that they would, of all the names, they pluck out Buddy Rogers pissed in somebody's Cheerios is what I think, and that's what he got for it. So,
If I had known wrestling a little better, I would have gotten excited and said, "Oh my God, Jack Pfeffer is booking. This is bitchin'."
Tremendous. That sounds like a Pfeffer. I didn't even change the name. At least, Jack changed it to Bummy. Yeah, Bummy Rogers. There you go. Oh, man, I love it. Okay, well, that did not disappoint as a closer. At the end of the day, we got the little Buddy Rogers. I'll put quotations around that.
Right on.
So we give everybody a little homework to do before the next episode. But when we return, we're going to talk about the return to the Olympic, March 26th, 1982. LeBell going to be back in the Olympic, but by June, he's going to lose his final piece of television, certainly one of the final nails in the coffin there. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about tons more talent that came through during the 1982 time period, including your buddy, Bobby Lane. Why don't you just set the stage a little bit there for Bobby Lane on the next episode?
I certainly will. That sounds good. Just when I got to know Tim Flowers, about maybe a month into our friendship, we go to the hotel, and there's a really handsome dude, mustachioed, bad boy Bobby Lane, who was the son of wrestlers Ann Laverne and Bobby Pico Sr. Most of his career he wrestled as Bobby Pico. He's also the brother of Marie Laverne.
Okay.
And yeah, he was a really solid worker. I'll never forget, he was a little thrown off by being put into main events because he flat out said, "I'm a jobber. I'm not supposed to be in main events." He was a really good worker, and we'll go more into the next episode.
Absolutely.
But one of the other things was, not as many women hung around, for the wrestlers toward the end. There weren't as many of those cuties around.
Gotcha.
I know a lot of people call them brats. I kind of don't like that.
I've heard that term a time or two. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But anyway, there weren't too many, but if there was some hot-looking babe and she was eyeing a wrestler, it was usually Bobby Lane.
Very good.
He had an it quality with women.
The it quality. There
so
you go.
even though he's wrestling, in a place that holds 500 people or something like that, if there was a looker in there, she was looking at Bobby.
Very good. Very good. We're going to have a lot more on Bobby Lane on the next episode. It was several years ago now that my world was opened into the 1982 Los Angeles by some videotapes that I got a hold of, and I converted, and I know I have somewhere, and I'm still looking for them, Vandal, because I want to share them with you. But there's a bunch of the Bobby Lane on there, and Adrian Street, Chris Adams, Ringo Rigby, Luis Mariscal, the Sweet Brown Sugar stuff. That's how I became privy to it. I go, wait a minute, this is not Skip Young. What is this? So I was kind of... But, I'm looking forward to finding that stuff because I want to go back over and watch it again. But it opened up a whole new world to me.
If you find some of that.
Oh, it's all yours,
if you
man.
Find that. I would love to see that. I would love to see those.
We will make it happen. But it was interesting because it kind of opened a new world to me because there was a lot of guys there in 82 that never really appeared again on the big scale, right? So these were names I had only seen in newspapers or magazines. And I was finally getting to see some of them, so that and results and things like that. So it was very, very cool. And that's what we're talking about right now. So I'm having a little nostalgic flashback to when I found those videos. So I'm looking forward to discussing this further. Bobby Lane, again, the end of Los Angeles coming, and several other names to get into as well. We'll talk about Vince McMahon taking over the territory and a whole lot more on our final episode, which will be our next episode together when we cover the demise of the Los Angeles territory. So looking forward to that.
I am looking forward to it.
Absolutely.
And thank you for having me on again. I am enjoying these.
Oh, my pleasure, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, Vandal Drummond, always welcome to the program. And at the end of the next episode, we've got more information for you on things we have planned for the future. But until then, it's time to wrap things up. Another Regional Rasslin in the books. Thanks so much for being here, Vandal.
Thank you. Looking forward to the next episode.